History remembers the hysteria, but it forgets the silence. Before the screams, there was only the suffocating, watchful shadow of the Salem woods, a place where every breath felt like an invitation to something you couldn't outrun. If you are watching this right now, I want to ask you something. How much of history do you think is actually true? Because what you are about to hear was never meant to reach you. These are the classified files, the buried evidence, and the forbidden stories that powerful forces spent decades trying to erase. If you are someone who refuses to accept the official story, you are in the right place. Subscribe to the Dark History Files and join thousands of truth seekers uncovering what history tried to hide. Welcome back. This is the Dark History Files, and today we expose a truth that was never meant to be told. Salem Village clung to the periphery of England's North American expansion. Small farms occupied pockets of cleared earth amidst vast, encroaching woodlands. Narrow, winding paths turned soft and treacherous after the rains. Modest dwellings stood in isolation, partitioned by timber fences and thickets. Beyond these fragile clearings, the forest pressed inward, a dark, impenetrable border separating the known world from a landscape defined by mystery. A traveler approaching the settlement heard the silence long before seeing the homes. Wind murmured through pine boughs, carrying whispers across open fields. The rhythmic groan of wagon wheels echoed over damp soil. Cooking smoke mingled with the sharp scent of wet timber and fresh-hewn wood. On crisp mornings, mist clung to the pastures, while the forest exhaled distant, unsettling cries that dissolved into the surrounding gloom. With the passage of seasons, the settlement's visage shifted in subtle, persistent ways. Fresh stumps marked the advance into the timber. Fences crept further into the wild. Fields ebbed and flowed with the cycle of harvest. Rain etched deep scars into the roads, and the constant tread of life widened the familiar ruts. Children aged, livestock multiplied, and structural repairs reshaped the homes. These quiet transformations unfolded with a slow, relentless rhythm, ensuring the landscape remained in perpetual, if imperceptible, flux. For those residing here, distance held a weight unknown to the modern mind. Distant towns remained abstract concepts, far removed from the pulse of daily survival. Most villagers spent their lives confined to a narrow orbit of fields and neighboring boundaries. The forest instilled a keen awareness of their vulnerability. It served as a stark reminder of the settlement's insignificance within a sprawling, untamed world. Each venture beyond their borders invited peril, while every return home offered a fleeting sense of security, hardened by years spent on the precipice of the wilderness. The forest surrounding Salem was no distant fixture. It pressed against daily life, dictating the scope of every journey. From any farmhouse, the eye met a wall of timber looming beyond the clearing. Even at high noon, these woods held a dense, impenetrable gloom. Sturdy trunks rose from uneven ground, shrouded by rotting brush. Paths slipped into this thicket, winding out of sight into the waiting shadows of the canopy. The terrain rarely yielded to straight lines. Undulating hills and hidden depressions governed where a homestead could take root. Streams carved through the landscape, rendering the ground unstable as the seasons turned. When spring brought snowmelt and rain, the earth dissolved into mire. Wagon wheels sank deep into the muck, demanding caution from every traveler. In the arid months, the mud yielded to dust, which hung in the air behind passing teams before settling like a shroud upon the fields. Survival relied heavily upon the land. Forests yielded the timber required for shelter, tools, and warmth. Fields demanded tireless, unrelenting toil to secure a harvest against the looming winter. Stone walls rose incrementally as farmers cleared their soil, each rock a testament to years of grueling labor. These markers of human persistence eventually weathered and merged with the landscape, blurring the boundary between the work of men and the wild terrain. Weather commanded the rhythm of life. A clear morning promised progress in the fields, yet a sudden tempest could upend all plans. Storm clouds massed rapidly, driven by winds that tore across the open ground and vanished into the trees. Winter posed the harshest trial. Snow masked the landscape, reducing familiar landmarks to ghost-like shapes beneath white drifts. The village fell into a hushed stillness, not in cessation of life, but in silent, arduous preparation for the cold. Despite such hardships, the residents cultivated an intimate, unwritten bond with their surroundings. They mastered the treacherous routes and identified which crossings held firm against the rain. Ancient trees served as sentinels. Specific ridges offered vantage points across the expanse. This wisdom was not drafted on parchment, but earned through a lifetime of labor. Generations inherited a wealth of observation, born of countless miles traversed on foot. Long before history claimed Salem, the village was defined by this restless, enduring dialogue between its people and the encroaching wilderness. Salem's roads bridged scattered households across a landscape devoid of convenience. They were not paved thoroughfares, but worn arteries carved by years of transit. Wagons, livestock, and rhythmic footfalls defined these narrow veins connecting farm to farm. In dry weather, they remained passable despite the uneven earth. Yet, rain transformed them. Mud gathered in the hollows, slowing progress and turning simple treks into arduous endeavors. A journey between homesteads revealed the true extent of the community's sprawl. Neighbors lived in isolation, tucked behind hills, bordering streams, or nestled against the timberline. Fields and forests created vast intervals between homes, obscuring sight lines and segmenting the world. While residents belonged to a single village, their existence remained confined to their own isolated corner of the geography. Travel was a necessity, not a luxury. Villagers traversed these routes to trade goods, attend worship, or conduct essential business. Every trip demanded careful calculation of the elements, daylight, and road stability. During winter, the landscape shifted beneath deep snow. Known landmarks vanished, and paths familiar under the summer sun became unrecognizable, alien trails obscured by the biting cold. These journeys served as the lifeblood for communal knowledge. News did not arrive in an instant. It traveled with the people. A visitor stopping at a doorstep brought reports from miles away. Brief exchanges at fence lines or over wagons knit the isolated inhabitants together. In an age without modern communication, the movement of people was the sole engine of information, filtering news through countless voices before it reached the village's furthest edges. The roads defined the character of Salem as starkly as any structure. They betrayed a community poised between connection and profound isolation. These paths united families, yet the vast distances served as a constant reminder of the encroaching wild. Every muddy rut and woodland track represented a precarious link between separate lives. Long before fear and suspicion marked its history, these roads carried the steady, quiet rhythm of farmers and children through a landscape shaped by distance, weather, and the solitude of existence. Homes in Salem were defined by stark utility. Most were modest timber structures, hewn from the surrounding forest and crafted with simple, unadorned precision. These dwellings existed purely for survival, not display. Inside, space was confined, with every room serving multiple purposes. Furnishings were sparse and functional. every item bearing the marks of necessity and the judicious use of scarce resources. The hearth sat at the heart of the home. It provided essential warmth and served as the focal point for all sustenance. Families gathered here after the day's toil to cook, converse, and labor within the firelight. The scent of burning pine permeated the air. Flames danced against rough-hewn walls, casting rhythmic, flickering shadows that shifted in the gloom. Beyond the threshold, barns and sheds supported the relentless work of survival. Livestock required constant protection, tools needed storage, harvests demanded preservation. These outbuildings formed the vital infrastructure of the homestead. Worn paths emerged between the dwelling, the well, and the fields, arteries of activity that became as ingrained in the residents' lives as the floors they walked upon. The layout of each property mirrored the harsh realities of rural existence. Survival hinged upon self-reliance and foresight. A leaking roof required immediate repair. Firewood demanded early collection. Provisions needed meticulous management. Success depended on anticipating necessity before it became critical. This lifestyle bred a culture of keen observation, where vigilance toward weather and the integrity of one's home remained the only barrier against misfortune. From afar, these farmsteads resembled isolated islands amidst an unforgiving wilderness. Thin plumes of smoke climbed from chimneys above irregular fields and boundary fences. Yet, despite the physical distance, every household remained tethered to the community by common struggle. Long before its name became synonymous with discord, Salem was merely a collection of families striving to forge stability within a demanding, untamed landscape. As twilight claimed Salem, the landscape underwent a profound transformation. The day's labors ceased, yielding to the anticipation of night. Farmers retreated from the fields, securing their tools for the morrow. Livestock were penned, and doors were barred against the encroaching chill. Across the settlement, the artifacts of daily toil vanished into the thickening gloom. The countryside, once vast and open under the sun, turned enigmatic as shadows pooled among the trees and hills. Light became a precious commodity once the sun retreated. Candles and hearth fires provided only sparse illumination, casting fragile halos against an encroaching void. Seated indoors, families heard the world outside more acutely than they could see it. Wind stirred the timber, and distant cries carried further through the night air. Their familiar world acquired a haunting atmosphere when sight no longer offered its usual reassurance. Night distorted the perception of distance. Proximity felt deceptive. Places reached easily by day seemed leagues away after sunset. Travel grew perilous as roads and landmarks dissolved into an unrecognizable expanse. Most remained sheltered as the boundaries of their world retracted with the light. The village subsided into a hush, governed by the dictates of darkness and caution. Above, the celestial void demanded reverence. On clear nights, an expanse of stars emerged, vast and intricate, far beyond the reach of modern light. Villagers tracked the shifting seasons by the heavens. Rising and waning constellations offered a sense of continuity, tethering their local struggle to cosmic cycles far greater than Salem itself. This was the world that endured before the Hysteria began. It was a community forged by timber, field, and the unforgiving climate. Residents navigated a landscape defined by both potential and peril. Their lives were governed by the cycle of seasons and the necessity of toil, long before history distorted their memory. Before Salem became a name etched in infamy, it was merely a modest village on the fringe of the wild, inhabited by souls bound to the steady, rhythmic pulse of an ordinary existence. The sharp, Sudden crack of a dry branch in the deep woods pierces the stillness, followed by a heavy, unnatural silence that seems to press against the ears, making every heartbeat sound like a drum in the dark. Mornings in Salem often broke before the sun. A pallid, gray light touched the horizon as families readied themselves for another cycle of toil. Farm implements lay prepared by doorways, livestock stirred in their pens, and kitchen gardens flanked the homesteads. Plumes of smoke curled from chimneys, rising as hearths were stoked for warmth and sustenance. Across the village, inhabitants resumed routines honed by countless seasons. Life was not measured by singular events, but by the relentless responsibilities that dawned with every sunrise. The early hours were a symphony of routine. Roosters signaled the encroaching light. Cattle shifted in their stalls, and sheep bleated from the pastures. The sharp scent of wood smoke hung in the crisp air as meals simmered over open flames. Dew-laden grass dampened boots during morning chores, while the rhythmic clink of metal tools provided a steady, metallic pulse. These sensory echoes formed the backdrop of village life, anchoring residents in the quiet, opening moments of the day. As the sun ascended, activity drifted from the homes into the fields. Farmers evaluated their crops, mended fences, and addressed the immediate demands of the land. Weather dictated the flow of labor. Fair days favored planting and harvest. Shifting skies redirected efforts toward protection and storage. These micro-decisions accumulated throughout the day, ensuring that routines evolved organically, guided by the caprice of nature rather than rigid schedules. To the villagers, labor was far more than a passage of time. Every completed chore fortified the household against the unknown. Harvests stored for winter, livestock nurtured to health, and productive fields offered a sanctuary of stability. Daily toil connected the people to seasons yet to come. Such routines held profound significance, for survival rested upon them. Long before Salem became a name etched in fear and accusation, its residents anchored their lives to these steady patterns of preparation and perseverance. As morning deepened, focus shifted to the surrounding fields. Agriculture demanded as much patience as physical grit. Farmers navigated crop rows, gauging the season's promise. A patch of soil might call for more labor. A broken fence threatened the safety of livestock. Every acre demanded vigilance. Success did not stem from singular, grand gestures, but from the quiet, rhythmic repetition of labor across the seasons. Villagers relied on humble, hand-wrought tools, yet these were prized assets. Hoes, axes, and wooden plows anchored the year's toil. Each implement bore the polish of use. Handles grew smooth beneath calloused palms. Metal blades required constant sharpening to remain viable. Maintenance was ritual. Neglect invited hardship, while a well-tended tool provided the only certainty during the season's demands. Cultivation obeyed the dictates of weather and lore. Seeds were sown when the earth deemed it favorable. Tenders nurtured young shoots, shielding them from the wild. As the weeks blurred, the landscape transformed. Green stalks claimed the soil, eventually signaling the harvest, a shift that refocused all energy. Families watched these fields with intensity. A harvest was not merely grain, but the thin barrier between plenty and want. Not all labor took place in the fields. Children contributed according to their strength, hauling water, tending herds, and assisting in minor tasks. Elders passed down wisdom not through words, but by example. A child learned the order of the farm through immersion, absorbing the nuances of planting and harvest. Work was both their primary burden and their ultimate education. By midday, the collective toil of the village reshaped the terrain. Freshly tilled earth, mended boundaries, and stacked timber stood as silent witnesses to their industry. These tasks garnered no mention in the chronicles of history, for they were the mundane pulse of daily life. Yet, this industry formed the bedrock of the settlement. Before Hysteria poisoned their bonds, Salem was a community defined by seasonal necessity, where every life centered on the quiet, arduous commitment to secure tomorrow through the labor of today. Beyond the fields, the heartbeat of the village resided with its livestock. Animals demanded unwavering attention, regardless of climate or whim. Cows provided milk, chickens offered eggs, and sheep yielded the wool essential for survival. These creatures were not peripheral. They lived in close proximity to those they sustained. Their health and productivity dictated the rhythm of every household. Morning chores began with the needs of the herd. Water troughs required filling, particularly when weather turned harsh. Fences demanded constant vigilance. A single breach invited disaster for both livestock and crop. Villagers developed a keen eye for the subtle. An animal's loss of appetite or change in demeanor served as an early warning of trouble. This constant interaction forged a deep, intuitive skill born of necessity. The auditory landscape of the village was defined by these creatures. Hens scratched through the yard, cattle lowed from the pastures, horses stamped against the earth. These sounds wove into the fabric of daily life, mirroring the cadence of human toil. To the residents, these noises were as familiar as a neighbor's voice, anchoring the settlement in a reality governed by nature. Animal husbandry dictated the constraints of time. Responsibilities could not be delayed. Feeding and supervision imposed a rigid, relentless cycle upon the day. Even amidst the frantic pace of harvest, the needs of the livestock remained paramount. The farm operated as a delicate, interconnected system. Neglect in one area inevitably fractured the stability of the whole. As the sun tracked across the sky, villagers balanced these competing duties. A farmer might labor in the fields, only to return to the barn before twilight. Children watched the herds, playing their vital role in the household's survival. These small, consistent efforts wove a tapestry of order. Long before Salem was immortalized by catastrophe, life was structured around these mundane obligations. The care of livestock was but one thread in the vast, collaborative design that sustained the community through the turning of the seasons. While fields and livestock demanded labor, the domestic sphere followed its own inexorable rhythm. Sustenance was never guaranteed. It was gathered, processed, and preserved through ceaseless toil. While this burden largely fell upon women, every household adapted to its own singular needs. The kitchen became a theater of perpetual activity, where the hearth served as both the source of warmth and the focal point of survival. Baking was a cornerstone of this domestic cycle. Harvested grain, processed and stored, eventually became the staple of daily life. Dough was kneaded by hand, utilizing techniques inherited through the generations. Soups and stews simmered over the coals, stretching limited ingredients to sustain the family. Meals remained functional and unadorned, dictated by local harvest rather than luxury or desire. The home was a center for unceasing industry. Textiles required mending, wool demanded processing. Household assets needed constant upkeep. Water was hauled from the depths, and timber was brought indoors for the coming night. To the casual observer, these hours might appear trivial, yet each task was vital to the family's health and resilience. Children were integrated into this labor as they matured. Obligations scaled with age. Simple duties gradually yielded to complex responsibilities. Practical wisdom was not taught in classrooms, but absorbed through immersion. Through observation and repetition, the youth mastered the arts of survival, cementing the bonds of cooperation that defined the household structure. As afternoon waned, the fruits of this labor became tangible. Provisions were secured, garments restored, and order maintained. Much of this work vanished, leaving no trace in the archives of time. While historians fixate on the dramatic, the community rested upon these quiet, foundational contributions. Long before Salem became a byword for calamity, its residents were defined by the steady, pragmatic maintenance of hearth and kin. These routines formed the essential, rhythmic pulse of the village, occupying countless hours across the turning of every season. Within the weekly cycle, the Sabbath held a singular authority in Salem. Religious devotion was not distinct from daily existence. It informed every facet of labor, lineage, and conduct. When the Sabbath dawned, the village rhythm recalibrated. Mundane tasks were cast aside as families turned their focus toward obligations both spiritual and social. The pilgrimage to the meeting house drew together those scattered across the remote farmlands. Pathways that usually bore the weight of timber and livestock instead served as arteries for families converging on a common center. Neighbors, seldom seen during the grueling week, exchanged quiet greetings. The congregation served as a vital nexus, reinforcing communal bonds as much as it proclaimed their collective faith. Inside the meeting house, the atmosphere stood in stark contrast to the toil of the homestead. The assembly listened to sermons with solemnity, participating in worship that mirrored their society's strict moral framework. These services endured for hours, demanding rigorous attention and discipline. Children were schooled in these expectations alongside their elders, absorbing a shared perspective through which the world was interpreted. Faith did not merely govern worship. It defined their understanding of hardship, prosperity, and duty. Time in Salem was measured by recurrent patterns rather than singular landmarks. Days were tethered to labor. Weeks were carved by the Sabbath. Seasons dictated the evolution of routine. Planting anticipated harvest, and autumn toil prepared the hearth for winter. While health, weather, and circumstance introduced fleeting variations, the structural integrity of their existence remained constant across generations. This was the world that thrived before suspicion fractured the settlement. Most residents anchored their lives to land, lineage, and faith. Their anxieties were rooted in the harvest, the flock, and the preservation of the home. The infamy that would later consume Salem remained in the future. For now, life moved to the steady, established cadences of their era. The village remained a small outpost on the precipice of the wilderness, its people consumed by the practical, unyielding demands of an ordinary existence. The mournful, lingering toll of a distant bell echoes through the valley, vibrating against the wooden walls of the homesteads and pulling the villagers away from their earthly labor into a shared, heavy moment of collective anxiety. 17th century New Englanders inhabited a reality far vaster than their fields and meeting houses. Parallel to their physical existence lay a spiritual landscape, equally tangible. God stood at the center, overseeing creation and orchestrating human destiny. Yet, opposing forces were equally potent. Satan, demons, and ethereal entities occupied a vital place in their worldview. To the villagers, the seen and unseen realms were not disparate, but inextricably bound. Daily life echoed these convictions through word, sound, and ritual. Sermons resonated in the meeting house, offering warnings and interpretations of the human condition. Prayers sanctified both hearth and public square. Scripture, committed to memory, provided the lexicon of existence. Faith permeated the ordinary, shaping the perception of fortune and adversity alike. A bountiful harvest or a sudden malady was never mere chance, but a manifestation viewed through the lens of spiritual discipline. In this paradigm, events invited profound interpretation. A tempest spurred introspection, an outbreak of sickness prompted inquiry into divine purpose. The inexplicable demanded meaning. Minor occurrences gained gravity when held against religious expectations. New experiences were filtered through the teachings of the pulpit, weaving individual lives into a broader narrative of celestial conflict and human frailty. For many, these beliefs imposed order upon an unpredictable world. Faith provided the framework to categorize experience into a coherent design. Suffering, temptation, and morality found their resolution in religious conviction. The unseen was rendered familiar, occupying a central pillar of the communal mind. To the modern observer, these concepts may appear remote. Yet, for the residents of Salem before the trials, the spiritual dimension was as immediate and immutable as the earth beneath them or the sky above. In the religious culture of New England, the struggle between good and evil was no abstract concept. It was an active, pulsating reality woven into daily life. Residents viewed existence as a relentless contest between divine providence and spiritual opposition. The world was never morally neutral. It was a stage where every choice carried profound, lasting consequence. God held absolute authority over all creation. No detail was deemed too trivial to escape divine notice. A thriving child, a blighted harvest, or a sudden fever were all interpreted as manifestations of God's will. This belief mandated constant introspection. Villagers scrutinized their thoughts and deeds, fostering a culture where personal conduct was perpetually measured against a spiritual yardstick. Simultaneously, Satan maintained a constant presence. He was no distant specter. His influence felt immediate. Pride, wrath, and deceit were seen as gateways through which spiritual malice could infiltrate a life. Religious leaders preached relentless vigilance, embedding these warnings into the community's vernacular and shaping how people confronted their own frailties. Narratives cemented these convictions. Sermons drew from scripture, history, and local accounts, circulating tales of temptation and perseverance. These stories, imparted by parents and ministers alike, defined the expected behavior of spiritual forces in the world. Gradually, the distinction between religious doctrine and the interpretation of daily life dissolved entirely. Because these beliefs were so deeply ingrained, supernatural explanations felt entirely rational. When life grew chaotic, the community possessed a framework to link visible hardship to invisible causes. Spiritual influence hummed in the background of every thought. Long before the accusations fractured Salem, its people inhabited a culture that demanded this dual lens. Their reality was comprised of both the physical and the unseen, inextricably bound in a logic that felt, to them, both coherent and undeniable. Religious doctrine fundamentally defined the identity of New Englanders. Raised on the conviction that human nature was a battleground of virtue and vice, residents practiced rigorous self-scrutiny. This introspection was no mere response to crisis. It was the cadence of daily life, governing how individuals measured their successes, failures, and private tribulations against the demands of faith. Temptation served as the focal point of this vigilance. It was rarely viewed as a singular, dramatic confrontation, but rather as an insidious presence manifesting through mundane desires and decisions. Ordinary frustrations and ambitions became subjects of intense spiritual concern. Consequently, internal experiences gained profound gravity. Emotions that might otherwise have been disregarded became matters of serious contemplation within this strict moral landscape. Dreams and private encounters also demanded interpretation. A striking vision, a potent surge of emotion, or an inexplicable coincidence prompted inquiry into deeper truths. While not every occurrence was deemed supernatural, the community remained sensitive to the possibility of divine communication through unexpected channels. This perspective invested chance events with significance, operating on the premise that the invisible realm constantly intersected with human life in subtle, profound ways. Such beliefs fostered a heightened sensitivity to moral weight. Inner life was paramount, intrinsically linked to the eternal stakes of salvation and divine judgment. Religious convictions permeated the most intimate spaces, private prayers, familial discourse, and solitary reflection. Faith did not merely dictate public ritual. It shaped the very architecture of thought, defining how people decoded their own experiences and desires. Across the village, spiritual consciousness remained the anchor of existence. While residents labored in fields and households, they simultaneously navigated a landscape of unseen realities. The physical world offered only the means of survival. The spiritual world provided meaning, explanation, and guidance. This synthesis created a cohesive vision of reality. Long before fear seized Salem, this framework already governed the lives of its people, shaping their perceptions of self, neighbor, and the vast world beyond. The natural realm served as a canvas for spiritual interpretation. Survival in Salem rested upon weather and harvest, forces too vital to be deemed mere chance. Bountiful crops inspired gratitude. Drought, storms, or pestilence invited deeper, more unsettling questions. Residents believed that such phenomena carried moral weight, serving as vessels for spiritual meaning beyond their immediate physical toll. Ministers fortified this view, urging congregations to discern divine purpose within worldly events. Disasters, conflict, and disease were parsed through a theological lens. Such interpretations imposed order on the chaotic, transforming isolated tragedies into elements of a vast narrative, a grand design linking human conduct to divine judgment and the trajectory of history. Portents held a firm grasp on the collective imagination. Celestial anomalies, strange livestock behavior, or rare natural events stirred more than passing curiosity. Reports of comets or erratic weather ignited community discourse. While consensus remained elusive, the willingness to view the extraordinary as a message from the heavens underscored a worldview where the physical and spiritual were fused. Information flowed through a network of shared belief. Sermons provided the foundation, yet hearthside conversations gave these ideas life. News carried by travelers was scrutinized, embellished, and disseminated. Through this dialogue, the significance of signs and warnings hardened into communal truth. Facts were never merely stated. They were debated within the rigid framework of their faith. By the era preceding the trials, the citizenry was conditioned to seek hidden truths beneath the surface of reality. The world appeared saturated with potential meaning. Ordinary life coexisted with the expectation of divine intervention. This habit did not inherently breed terror. For many, it provided structure and solace. Yet, it cultivated a mindset where unseen malice remained a plausible explanation for visible affliction, a perspective that would soon prove pivotal as Salem drifted toward its darkest chapter. By the late 17th century, the spiritual universe of Salem had woven itself into the very fabric of existence. Faith dictated speech, labor, and resilience. Religious tenets were not confined to the Sabbath. They permeated routine and governed countless choices. Children matured on scripture, while adults processed sermons that tethered personal conduct to vast spiritual realities. These doctrines became the lens through which the community interpreted the world. In this sphere, the demarcation between the visible and invisible was fluid. Residents accepted that forces beyond mortal perception could dictate human affairs. Divine providence, angelic intervention, and satanic temptation were not mere academic concepts for the pulpit. They formed a shared psychological landscape. These ideas accompanied every action, from traversing village paths to tending the fields. Belief was the constant companion of experience. This worldview cultivated a profound sense of accountability. Every action bore weight beyond the immediate, carrying moral consequences that rippled into the spiritual realm. Consequently, individuals engaged in rigorous introspection. Faith provided a compass during turbulence and an explanation for the inexplicable. For many, religion imposed order upon a world that often defied human mastery. Yet, belief in unseen influences introduced possibilities that remain alien to the modern mind. If spiritual forces could alter reality, then unusual events demanded scrutiny beyond the physical. Malady, conflict, and misfortune were analyzed through multiple layers of meaning. This habit of interpretation, honed by years of instruction and reflection, became the natural method for navigating the mysteries of daily existence. As this chapter closes, Salem remains a settlement of families pursuing mundane goals. Fields still require tilling, homes still demand upkeep. Roads connect the farmsteads beneath shifting skies. Yet, beneath these visible rhythms lies an ironclad framework of belief that dictates how residents perceive reality. Long before accusations arise and courtrooms fill with testimony, the machinery of interpretation is set. The people of Salem inhabit a world where unseen forces possess substance, spiritual explanations hold authority, and the invisible commands a presence as potent as anything that can be touched. But as the hearth fires die down tonight, you'll realize that the shadows in the corner aren't just tricks of the light. They're watching, and in Salem, the invisible is starting to take hold. The next part is coming in just 48 hours.